In this video, we're painting Night Lords for the Horus Heresy. Hi all, and welcome to the cabin. We made a bunch of videos about my Night Lords army for the Horus Heresy, and I thought it would be a good idea to put all the painting segments together in one complete guide. This is the updated version with all the tweaks that I've made along the way. Let's get to it. I started by undercoating the models with Leadbelcher spray paint, since I wanted the army to have a slightly metallic blue color. For the bases, I chose Chaos Black instead. The first area to be painted was the power armor, as this covers by far the largest surface area on all the models. To create some shadows, I first applied Vallejo gunmetal from below using the airbrush, but Iron Warriors from Games Workshop would also work. On the tanks, I tried to focus this on the deeper parts. Then I did the opposite and sprayed some Vallejo silver from above as a zenithal highlight. Runefang steel or Stormhost silver are great substitutes for this if you're only using Citadel paints. On the tanks, I limited this to the middle of the flat armor sections. If you don't own an airbrush, you can always dry brush these metallics instead. To seal all this and prepare the armor for the next stage, I applied gloss varnish using the airbrush. Next up, I used the old Nuln Oil gloss variant all over the models, making sure it went into the recesses and didn't pool anywhere. The gloss varnish really helps with this stage. You could also use an enamel paint like the Tamiya Black Panel Line accent color for this, or simply the current normal Nuln Oil. Just make sure it doesn't stain the whole surface by applying it only in the recesses. Next up, I used a color mix which I like to call Curse Clear Blue all over the armor. After testing a lot of different contrast paints, I came up with the recipe to create a semi-transparent but deep dark blue with undertones of purple, which in my book is the perfect midnight blue for the Sons of Nostromo. It's basically 1 part Vallejo Flow Improver, 1 part Vallejo Airbrush Thinner, 2 parts Talassar Blue, 2 parts Ultramarines Blue, 2 parts Shyish Purple, and 5 parts Contrast Medium. So anyway, I applied this mix through the airbrush at around 20 psi. This produced a smooth, semi-transparent coat on top of the metallic base very quickly. On vehicles, you can mask off bigger areas which should remain silver using tape or sticky tack. The hands on the guns and some other parts I painted with a normal brush. And you can always paint all the armor this way as well. If you do that, try to avoid the areas that are going to be silver later to save some time. Next, I applied another coat of gloss varnish on top of the armor to seal in the thin coat of blue. For the final step, I wanted to simulate some chipping on the armor. Using a sponge, I applied Runefang steel, focusing on the edges and parts where damage would logically appear. With that, the armor is done. Time to move on to the details. I reapplied Leadbelcher as a base coat where the blue paint had obscured any silver parts. These include armor trims, cables, and tank tracks. I then washed those areas with Nuln Oil and finished them with an edge highlight of Runefang steel. On commanders and unit leaders, I painted the armor trims golden instead with a base coat of Gehenna's Gold. I washed these with Reichland Fleshshade, followed by a highlight with a 50-50 mix of Gehenna's Gold and Runefang steel. The armor seals were base coated with Grey Sear. After that, I simply applied some Basilicanum Grey to them. The gun panels and other black details were base coated with Black Legion. I then chose Dawnstone as an edge highlight. For the bullets, skull motifs, and other small details on the guns, I painted Gore Grunt of Fur over the silver base, diluting the paint with about 50% contrast medium. I base coated the coils and some other details on Volkite weapons with Balthasar Gold. After that, I applied a wash of Agrax Earthshade and a highlight of Sycorax Bronze. The leather holsters were base coated with Balor Brown. Next, I washed them with Agrax Earthshade and used Xandri Dust as an edge highlight. To bring everything together and give it a more reddish, leathery look, I washed these areas with Reikland Flesh Shade. I base coated any flayed skin and severed heads with Kislev Flesh. Exposed muscles on the trophies were base coated with Pink Horror. Then I washed everything with Caribur Crimson. To bring back some definition, I layered on Kislev Flesh and dry brushed on some Pink Horror on the muscles. As a highlight for the skin, I used a 50-50 mix of Kislev Flesh and Pallid Witch Flesh. To bring everything together, I added a filter of Gilliman Flesh diluted with a lot of contrast medium. For the skulls and bones, I chose Ushapti Bone as a base coat, with a wash of Seraphim Sepia afterwards. To deepen the shadows, I applied Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. I chose Screaming Skull as a highlight, and also used this to paint the strings and teeth on the trophies, followed by Snakebite Leather on the strings. Red details such as the wings on the Night Raptor's helmets were base coated with Corn Red. For the gems and lenses, I first painted a dot of white scar over a black base before layering on the Corn Red. On the wings, I added a wash of Caribur Crimson. This was followed once again by a layer of Corn Red. All areas were then highlighted with Wazdaka Red. For the final highlight, I used Pink Horror on the wings. And for the gems, I chose Wild Rider Red instead. To finish it off, I applied a filter of Blood Angels Red diluted with a lot of contrast medium. Some Forge World models have Nostroman cards and chest banners, and these were base coated with Celestra Grey. I then shaded them with Nuln Oil and added a highlight of Corax White. Using a fine detail brush, I finished them with a few Nostroman runes painted in Abaddon Black. For Nostroman skin, I started with a base coat of Pallid Witch Flesh, which is even paler than the Kislev flesh on the flayed skin and trophies. To highlight it, I used White Scar, resulting in a very white skin tone. To bring that back a bit and add some definition, I applied Targor Rage Shade all over. Night Lords are known for their jet black eyes, so I painted them with Black Legion to represent that. I also diluted Volupus Pink with a lot of contrast medium and glazed this in multiple coats around the metal plates and service studs to simulate some irritation in the flesh. For some helmets, I added war paint using Corax White, starting by applying it in thin lines. This was to create an uneven top which would simulate the Night Lords painting this on themselves. I then filled in the lower parts of the forehead until the paint reached full opacity, but left the jagged tops showing. After that, I moved down to the grille, which helps achieve a skull-like appearance when you leave the recesses without the war paint. For the eye lenses, I started by painting watered-down white scar over the lens, allowing it to spill over slightly onto the armor. Then I applied Doomfire Magenta all over the white area. To make the glowing effect pop more, I added a small amount of white scar in the center of the lens. followed by Doomfire Magenta once again, this time diluted with 50% contrast medium so that the tint would not be as strong over the white. The coils on plasma weapons were base coated with Baharoth blue. I then used watered down white scar in the recesses and towards the bottom edges of the coils. As an edge highlight, I applied Temple Guard blue. For the final edge highlight, I chose Sotek green. I used diluted Baharoth blue and painted this outside the edges of the coils to create a glowing effect. The Narthekium that apothecaries have features a small glass vial which I base coated with rust grey. To simulate the water level where it meets the progenoid gland at the bottom, I painted a thin line of blue horror horizontally. This gland was painted in the same way as one of the other vials, starting with a base coat of Screamer pink. I added a wash of Karaberg crimson to these, and a highlight of pink horror. The other vial was base coated with Warpstone glow. I chose Bilton green for the wash, and Moot green for the highlight. For hazard stripes on vehicles, I added masking tape around the area and then started with a base of Ural yellow. You can use a normal brush for this, but I like the smooth coat an airbrush can produce, and as you can see, it takes a few coats for the yellow to become fully opaque on top of the silver. Next, I sponged on some Abaddon black to represent the yellow paint being chipped, revealing the black beneath. I then did even more masking, attaching small strips of 5mm wide tape from Tamiya next to each other at an angle. After that, I removed every other piece of tape to create the empty spaces where the black paint would go. Painting Abaddon black over the yellow was much easier as it covers far better, so I definitely recommend doing yellow first. Before removing the tape, I sponged on Runefang steel on the black parts to represent the paint chipping away to the metal underneath. After peeling off the tape and checking that it looked good, I also added some silver in the middle of the larger black splotches on the yellow areas to simulate the metal of the door showing through. A final round of sponging along the edges also helped to sell this effect. To finish everything off, I added some Nuln oil in the holes on the yellow stripes for some definition, but also to make them look a bit grimy. At this point, I applied the transfers to the models, and we have a separate video about that linked on screen now if you're interested. The Night Lords are well known for having lightning bolts projected on their armor. To simulate this, I airbrushed a 2-to-1 mix of Vallejo Dead White and Electric Blue, carefully at about 10 to 15 psi. If you're using Citadel paints, you could substitute these with White Scar and Lothern Blue. Using a normal paintbrush, I then chose pure White Scar to draw thin, irregular lines inside the blue areas. At this point, the painting was done, so I assembled everything with super glue except for the bases and applied satin varnish on the miniatures. After that, I used some True Blood and coagulated blood from Green Stuff World on the muscles and a little bit on the skin too. You could also use Blood for the Blood God from Citadel for this instead. For any sculpted rocks, I used Skavenblight Dinge as a base coat. This was followed by a wash of Nuln oil and a dry brush of Storm Vermin fur. After pinning the miniatures to the bases, I applied PVA glue and then some base-ready Grimdark City Rubble from Geek Gaming Scenics, starting with a few bigger stones before pouring on the rest of the mix. And there you have the complete painting guide for my Night Lords. Let's end the video with a few shots of finished miniatures from the army. If you want to know more about these units, there are currently 9 videos on the channel about this project, featuring everything from the army list to how I converted certain minis and a whole bunch of lore that I've written for them. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. A special thank you to Allnold over on Patreon. And if you want to go that extra mile and get some nice perks while helping us out, all our links are in the description below. We'll see you next time. Good luck with your miniatures.